Welcome to Live DAF, your online DAF Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's DAF Hayemi, Maseches Bava Kamma, DAF Chavches. We're holding 5 lines off the top of the Amud, Tashma. So we had a machlekes yesterday. Can a person sometimes take matters into his own hands to retrieve his property, to protect his belongings? So it depends. If time is of essence, it's critical, there's an immediate chance of loss, of hefsid, then yeah, you can quickly interfere to protect his property. However, if time is not of essence, if it's not so critical, you could, technically wait until he addresses it in the Bezdin. Does he have to do so? We have machlekes amoraim. Some say yes, some say he's not obliged to wait until then. Today we're going to try to bring proofs one way or the other. Tashma, here comes a raya from a brayso. We have a story of an animal who jumped on top of the other animal to attack him. Shoyer sha'Allah al gabi chaver lo hergoy. So Reuven's ox jumps onto Shimon's to kill him. Uba bal hatachten v'shamet esheloi. Shimon sees his animal under attack. He quickly pulls his animal away from beneath Reuven's animal, resulting in the upper animal falling down and dying. Shimon is patur because he has full right to protect his belongings. Okay, Maila b'muad. So we're assuming that the attacking animal was already habitualized. He was a muad, in which case, if he would actually, be successful in his attack, he would kill Shimon's animal, then he would have to pay 100%. The owner would be fully responsible. Like Upseda, in which case there is no real loss involved. Even if he does kill Shimon's animal, Shimon will be able to retrieve fully all his losses. So we see that even in this case, when there's no, immediate loss, there's no Upseda factor, Shimon has full right to control matters. No, like Tom was speaking that Reuven's animal is just a Tom, in which case, at most, he would just pay 50%. So Shimon is really facing a possible 50% loss. Now, of course, he has a right to step in. Dikapseda, because he wants to avoid loss. If that's the case, that he's facing possible loss, amos safe. Let's move on to the next part of the brayso, which says, suppose instead of yanking out his animal from beneath the attacker, he actually shoves the attacker off his animal, which, caused the animal's death, which perhaps could have been avoided if he would have acted more gently and just pulled out his animal, slipped his animal out. In this case, we say Shimon is chayiv. Question: if we're speaking about a tam situation, in which case he's facing loss, am I chayiv? Why is he responsible? He had full right to do so. Well, instead of shoving the upper animal off and throwing him down, he should have slipped his animal out, which would have been a more gentler way of doing it, and would have spared the upper animal. So yeah, he has a right to protect his animal, but not to be overly aggressive and overdo it. Toshma, here comes another right. So imagine Reuven brings a 18-wheeler full of barrels, wine, oil, and decides to store them in his friend Shimon's chatzar without permission. Bala chatzar. So now Shimon, the Bala chatzar, Meshaber v'yotzei, can break his way out. Meshaber v'nichnas, break his way back in if he needs to, without any qualms as to Reuven's barrels. Okay, so there you see that you can be avid dina l'nafshei. A person could take matters into his own hands, even at the expense of his friend's property. Amar Nachbar Bar Yitzchak, no. We're speaking about something which he has a full right to do, to go to the Bezdin. Mishaber v'yotzei leBezdin. He's trying to get out to go to the Bezdin. He has a right to do that. Mishaber v'nichnas lo v'zchuyoseh. Why would he break his way back in? Suppose the Bezdin is now obliging him to bring some documentation that the chatzar actually, belongs to him. So for that, he was compelled to break his way back into the property, and that's okay, even if by doing so he damages some of the containers. But otherwise, just to take matters into your own hands, which is, in a way which is not Bezdin related, perhaps you cannot do that. Tashma, here comes another attempt at a raya. So we have an Eved Ivri who's meant to serve, for 6 years, and then go free, decides to stay on. So he now assumes the status of an Eved Nirtza, which stays until Yovel, but his days are up. Okay, Yovel comes and goes, and he's meant to leave, and he decides to stay on. The owner says, look, it's time to get going. So he's insisting on him leaving, and things got physical, and he harmed him physically. Shu Potter. How do we know that the owner is Potter? Because after all, he had full right to chase him out of the house. Talmud Loim, the pasuk says, don't accept any payment, don't obligate any financial payments. Lo shuv. What does lo shuv mean? Lo shuv to a fellow who's meant to leave. He's meant to go back home. He's not cooperating, so the owner has a right to push him out, even at the expense of bodily damage. Okay, there you go. Avid inish dinner lafshe. A person can take matters into his own hands, even at the expense of this victim. And the answer is, we're speaking ba'avda ganva. Typically, you can't do that, but we're speaking that this Eved is a thief. So there's immediate hefsid. Of course, he has a right to push him out. Well, what happened all of a sudden? Until now, he was a loyal Eved. He wasn't stealing. Suddenly, today, when he's meant to leave, you decided that he's a criminal, which justifies, bodily harm. Ada idna. Until now, loy ganav. He didn't steal. Vashta ganav. Now he's suddenly stealing. Well, yeah. Until now, he had a deterrent. He wanted to maintain good relations with his master, but now he's free to go, so he's just, letting loose. Ada idna, until now, aim say the Rabbi Allah. Until now, the aim of the awe, fear of his master was upon him, which deterred him from this type of behavior. Hashta, but going forward, when he's about to go free, last lay aim said the Rabbi Allah, there is no aima factor, and therefore he's letting loose, and therefore the Rabbi wants to get him out as quickly as possible, even at the expense of bodily harm, which he's allowed to do, because in this case, he's facing financial loss. That's one pshat. That explains this halacha. Another pshat. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Amar be'eved shemasar le'Rabbi Sheva Knan. So we know that Eved Ivri can be paired up with a non-Jewish maidservant. That's the halacha. The owner has the right to do that, to produce offspring as slaves. So this Eved is paired up with a Sheva Knanis, and he's insisting on staying on. And now we're running into a question of Isra, because Ado idno hetera, until now, when he was really an Eved Ivri, so this is fully justified. He has a permission to live with the Shifra Knanis. But Bahashta Yisur, going forward, he's meant to leave. Okay? So he's not allowed to stay with the Shifra Knanis. So the Adon is just trying to protect him spiritually, and he has a right to do that. Okay? So he's allowed to shove him out by force. Tashma. Here's another raya. Hamaniach Hasakad, Bishus Arab, person places his container in the middle of the street. Uba Acher B'niskalba, a pedestrian comes along and stumbles on it. Vishibur, and he breaks it as he does so. Potter doesn't have to pay for the damages. Why does the halacha here mention niskal? He inadvertently stumbles on it. What if he deliberately breaks it because it's sitting in the street in my way? Apparently that you can't do. You can't take matters into your own hands as justified as you think you are. Tama niskal, he's only Potter for breaking it because he bumped into it. But if he would have deliberately broken the thing, he would have to pay for it. That's a right. Amar is written from the Rav. No. Perhaps the same exact halacha would apply if he actually breaks it, deliberately breaks it. He's allowed to do that, sitting in the street. So why do we say niskal, that he stumbled into it? For the next halacha in the Mishnah, I did the Kabbalah Mishnah safe, because the Mishnah continues with another aspect of this halacha. Number one, if he breaks it, it's potter. But what if he trips on it once it's broken? Imhuzak. If after breaking the container, the pedestrian slips on it and hurts himself, balachav is chayiv. The container owner is chayiv for that, chayiv beniska. Now this is only the dafka beniska if he, stumbled upon it and broke it in that manner. So now the container, the person who owned the container is fully responsible. But avol shavar, if the pedestrian literally broke it, knowingly broke it, perhaps he had a right to do so, but you can't hold the container, owner responsible for any damages incurred by slipping on the broken pieces, because you broke it deliberately. You You were mazik yourself. So, in that case, shavar would not work. So because the Mishnah wanted to mention that second halacha as well, which is specific to niskal, Tani Reisha niskal, that's why, only because of that, did the Mishnah mention niskal and the Reisha as well, with respect to the first halacha. But really, with regard to the first halacha, shavar and niskal would have the same halacha, meaning if you find a container in the street, you have a flight to break it because there's no business being there. Okay, Tashma, here comes another attempt at a raya. Can a person take matters into his own hands or not? Because so he says, kappa moment. So we have two men fighting. One of the wives grabs hold of one of the men in an embarrassing way, and she has to compensate him financially for the embarrassment that she caused him. Now, why is she responsible? She was just trying to protect her husband. My love, apparently we're speaking, let's assume, she had no other means of protecting her husband. And still, you see, she's obligated to pay compensation. Apparently, it's not justified. No, we're speaking that she had other alternatives, and she chose this manner, and therefore she has to pay. But otherwise, if she's really stuck, she would be justified. Well, says the Gemara, okay, do you mean to say she had no other option, she would be patur, because she had a right to do so? If that's the case, Adatani is safer. So why does the Brisa continue and shift to a different case? The Brisa is trying to, bring a case where she would, where the person would be patur for embarrassing somebody. What does the Brisa relate to? A shliach bezdin. That seems to be the only case where embarrassment does not elicit financial compensation. She extended her hand and embarrassed him. That's only because it was a regular, ordinary person who had no right to do so, prat l'shliach bezdin, as opposed to a representative of the bezdin who's patur for embarrassing if he's doing it, as part of his duties, doing the einish of bezdin. Okay, right? So that seems to be the only case where striking at a person in an embarrassing way would be exempt from payment. Lifleg will listen to the. Now, instead of shifting to the case of the shliach bezdin, let's just find a distinction within the case of the isha herself, because after all, that was the starting point of the brisa. Right? She did it, so sometimes she has to pay because she had an alternative. But as you explained to me, if she had no other choice, no other option, rather than embarrassing this fellow in order to protect her husband, she would be patur, according to what you're saying, right? When do we say that there's compensation in place? When she had another choice, she had another option in terms of protecting her husband. But if there is no other option, she had no other way to protect her husband. Patura, do you mean that she's patur? Right? So why didn't the Brisa mention this if in fact it's true? You're right, that's exactly what the Brisa is saying. The Brisa means like this. When does the Isha have to pay for embarrassing this stranger? When we know she had another option. But there was no other alternative. Rather than doing what she did, Nasa Yada, Shliach Bezdin, Ptura would treat her hand, her action, as though it was a Shliach Bezdin, meaning we sanction it, and she's really patur. Tashma, here comes another attempt at a raya. Imagine suddenly the crowd is walking through his backyard. Okay, so the street sort of diverted, detoured through his field. Notla, v'nasan lahem and atzad. So he diverts the crowd back out to the side. He blocks his route, he blocks his field, and he redirects the crowd around this field. Masha nasan nasan. Great, beautiful. The new route that he gave the public now belongs to them. V'shaloi lahigiyoi. But he doesn't get back his own path. Why? Vi amrus. If it is so, that Ovid inish dinul nafshay, a person has full right to protect his property. Linkoid pazra relasiv. So what's the issue? Let him get back his path. Let him stand by his path with a big club, a pazra, big club, sit down there and block the crowds from coming into his path. Amar Zvid Mishmei Rav. The reason why we can't do that, we don't want to implement this type of a system where people can just redirect and redivert crowds, there's always a concern that he might actually give them a long, more of a roundabout route, which is unfair to the public. Right? So therefore, you can't just go ahead and manipulate the crowds. Rav Misharshi Amar benoisen lehem derech hakalasim. We're speaking that they actually did that. Instead of giving them, another route to walk on, which was, just as straight and smooth, he gave them a roundabout circular path, which is totally unfair, and therefore this whole, exchange doesn't work. Rav Ashi Amar kol ben atzad derech hakalasim. Even if he gave them a perfectly straight path, but if it's on the side instead of over here, then by definition it's called a roundabout way. You know why? Called min atzad derech hakalasan, because it's kroiva lezeh v'ruchayka lezeh, because it's a no-win situation, because whichever way you divert the crowds, you're going to be, let's say you go to the east, so the people living at the west are now compelled to walk more, right? Or if you give them at the west, so the people from the east will have a long way to go. So either way, you're being unfair to somebody, and therefore it doesn't work. Well, okay, if that's the case, so fine. Okay, the system didn't work. You're not going to accept my arrangement. Fine. So why can't he take back what he gave them now? Initially, they were walking through his field. He decided to divert them. He gave them some other pathway in his property, but off to the side. Well, we cancel the deal. Okay, so let him just go back to square one. Leimalu should tell him, Shkulu ditchu, take back your path that you used before. Vavali didn't give me back the one that I just gave you, my other property. The answer is he can't do that either. B'shum Rabbi Yehuda, we have special takanis when it comes to public thoroughfares. It's like giving something to Shemaim. It's like Hegdish. Some Mepharshim say there's a knas for the manipulating the traffic. The Amar Vida Meita Shechziki by Rabbim, a boundary, a pathway, a route that was sort of adopted by the crowds. Also, localfile, you can't undo it. That's the halacha, so it's too late. Toshma, here comes another right. Balabayit sheniach peya mitzad echad. So this fellow is a farmer. He meant to give away a corner of the field for the poor people, the peya. He designated this corner as peya, and they took from the other area. Ubo aniyim v'notlu mitzad acher. What's the halacha? Zev is a peya. Both corners are treated as peya. Why? Vi amris ovid inish dinu nafshei. Well, a person can take matters into his own hands. Let him protect his property. Amai, why do we compel him to give away both corners? Amai zev is a peya. Lin could pazer v'leisiv. You should get up with a club and block the crowds from taking this peya. I gave you this, not the other one. Okay, you took the other one. Fine, but don't come back here. Amar Rabbi, you're right. Ma zev is a peya. What that means is not that he has to give away both areas. Lepoitro min ha'masr means that the peya that he had designated initially is considered peya halachically with respect to being exempt from maaser. So we know that peya is pater from maaser. That's the halacha. So although they took the other corner, and this one remained his, he had the right to take it back, but it's regarded as peya with respect to p'tur of maaser. Kedesanya, as we learned in a brayso, mafker as karma. A person renders his vineyard ownerless, he makes it hefker. V'ishkem abaykin, gets up in the morning and regains ownership. Ubatzroi, and he picks the grapes. Basically, he retakes it. Chayev a peret, uba oilulos, uba shikcha, uba peya. So all the halachas of matnis aniyim apply. Something drops peret, gives it to the aniyim. Ba'ilulus, if it's a weirdly growing type of plant, he gives it to the aniyim. This is discussed in Mesechas, in the Israel Mesechtes. If he forgets something, or the corner, the peya goes to the aniyim. So basically, all those ordinary matanos aniyim, gifts to the aniyim, apply to this thing because Rashi explains, even though it was really hefker. But we have a special pasuk that even this type of hefker, which was hefker for a moment and then re-owned, all these halachas apply to it. But upater min ha'maser, when it comes to maser, Rashi says there's no special pasuk for that. So even sort of a semi-hefker such as this, which was hefker only for a short time, so even this short-lived hefker has the halacha of tur min ha'maser. Likewise, in our case, the initial peya, which he designated for the aniyim, which they didn't tap into, is considered peya / hefker, which is pater min ha'maser. Okay, so bottom line is, we have this major machlekes. Can a person take matters into his own hands? So if he's facing immediate loss, of course he could. But otherwise, we have a machlekes, whether or not he has to run to the bezdin and deal with it over there, or he can just jump ahead and protect his property. We tried to bring many rayas, which didn't really pan out. Okay, here comes a new Mishnah. Nishbur Kade B'Shas Rab. So a fellow is walking along. He has a container full of, let's say, water, and it breaks on the street. Another person comes along and he slides. He slips on that water, and he's harmed. Or he's struck by the pottery shards, and once again he is hurt. Chayav. So the container owner is chayav for all resulting damages. Rabbi Yehuda, what depends? If it was done purposely, then he has to pay. But if it was done by accident, he's potter, which we will explain in the Gemara. Now, what exactly harmed this person? What happened? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Rav, when do we say that the container owner is responsible for any damages? We're speaking that the pedestrian's kalim, his garments or his whatever that he, any belongings of his, as opposed to the person himself, any belongings were damaged, were dirtied by the water or by the pieces of pottery. He said because Rav learns that this fellow who dropped this barrel did not make it hefker; he still owns it. So the mamayin hamazik is regarded like a shur, like his ox. We compare it to a shur. And if a shur is mazik, he's chayev. He's mazik a kli, he's chayev, right? So here the broken material, the water there that was mazik, this person's kalim, he's chayev for it because it's like his shur, that's mazik. We don't treat it like a boyer because a boyer, Rav learns, is only something that you made hefker. Here, he still owns the water and the puddle and the broken. So therefore, we treat it like a shoyer, and a shoyer is responsible for damaging even kalim. Okay, that's pretty clear. Aval hu atzmei potter. But if the pedestrian himself, slipped on the water and he was hurt, the other fellow was potter. Karka olam izikase, because he was struck on the floor. He slipped and he hit on the floor. He hit the floor. That's karka olam. That's common ground, meaning it wasn't my water or my pottery that hurt you. So therefore, he's potter. So that was Rav's shita. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, who quotes Rav, went over and learned by Shmuel as well. So when he quoted, he says, when I quoted this halacha of Rav that treats the material as a shur, and therefore you chayev for kalim being damaged. When I quoted this to Shmuel, he disagreed. He said it's a bar. Amarli, he says like this. Michti, let's look at this a bit closer. Avnoi v'sakina yumasoy. A person's stone, a knife, a load, which caused damage in the street, which is very similar to this case. It's derived from bur. It's similar to bur. It's an obstacle, right? And we know that by a bur, it has very specific limitations, meaning it's only chayev for a shor that falls into the bur, or a chamor, an animal, but not a person, or not a kli. So this is like a bird, it's an obstacle in the street. And with respect to all these obstacles, I apply the formula which is shor v'layodam. The pasuk says, "V'nafal shama shor chamor." Shor chamor falls into the bird. That's when you pay. Shor v'layodam, but not a person. Chamor v'laykel, not kalim. So the only way that you're responsible for your broken thing and your water is if it hurts a shor or chamor. Now, just as an aside, when a person is exempt, meaning you're not chayev for damaging a person, that's only with respect to killing a person, because after all, that's the topic of conversation in that pasuk. The animal died, so if a person dies in a bar, he's potter. But if a person is hurt, then adam chayev, then even a person is included, meaning if a bar hurts a person, you pay for that. The kelim pturim, but still, the ptur, the exception of kelim still applies. Rashi says because by a kli there's no concept of damage versus killing. You break the kli, you've killed the kli. So there's no difference there. So bottom line is, says Shmuel, the mayim or the charsis that hurt a person are treated like a bar. In which case we have to follow the guidelines of bar. You're only responsible for an animal, shor or chamor, but not if he killed a person. But if he hurt a person, yes. And not for kalim at all. So according to Shmuel, when the Mishnah says you're responsible for your accident there, we're speaking that the person was hurt, but not the kalim, because it's a bar. The Rav. So what does Rav say to this? I agree that avnoi, shakinim, masoy, all these types of obstacles in the street are treated like a bar, provided he was mafkirit, because a bar is typically something which is ownerless. But if he still owns, the material in the street, mamoinahu, it's his mamain, and we treat it like a shoyer rather than a bar, and therefore yichayeh for mazik of kelim. Masiv Rav Oishi, avakash. Right, so that's the pasuk describing an animal falling into a pit. Shoyer v'lo right? Chamoir v'lo kelim. Mekan Amar, we learn from here. Naf al soichei shoyer v'kelim. Finished tabru. Person digs a pit in the street. A shoyer with his accessories fall into the pit, and and we have havoc in there, right? Chamoir v'kelim v'niskaru. Chamoir falls in there with his saddles and stuff, and they tear apart, and we have a mess. Chayev al behema upater al kelim. So the pit owner pays for the animal, but not for the accessories. Right, so that's the standard halacha. And now the Brisa continues and makes sort of an equation. What is this comparable to? What do we compare an animal falling into a pit to? La'avnoi, sakinoi, masoi, all those items in the street, and they cause damage. Hold it 1 second. Let's take a pause. We're using avnoi, sakinoi, masoi as a catalyst, as a basis for the standard halacha of a shar falling into a bar, which is a pasuk. This is a pasuk. That's just sort of an extension. It's just another example. So why are we sort of being tailored the story of the shor, which is described in a pasuk, on a case of a avnoi sakine, which is something we invented, so to speak, right? Adarabba. We should have gone the other way. Here, we'll cite an example of something which is comparable to the shor falling into the bar, which is the classic example in the Torah. Okay, you're right. Let's switch it around. What other similar instance can be compared to the shor falling into a bar? Avnoi v'sakini masoi, right? Shenich mishisaram v'ziku, and they treat it like a bar, and they follow the guidelines of a bar, the formula of a bar. In which case, you chayiv only for the shor or the chamar, but not for the adam or kelim. And the Brisa continues. Here goes. Lefichach amitiach lechisa be'evan chayiv. We have a contradictory halacha now. So therefore, because something placed in the street is treated like a bar, so listen to this. So a person's walking along with a tzleichis, with some sort of container, and he smashes into this stone parked in the middle of the street. Chayav. The stone owner has to pay for my damages. 1 second. Stone is a bar. Bar is pater for kelim. A minute ago you just told me that evidence in the street is like a bar, and bar is pater on kelim. So why is it chayiv in the safe? Reisha kashi l'rab. So the first part of the Brisa, which tells you that a stone in the middle of the street, we're assuming that he wasn't mafkir the stone. It still is a load in the middle of the street. It still is. It's treated like a bar and follows the guidelines of bar. It's not a shor. That's a kasha to Rav, who says that your item in the street is yours and it's considered like a shor, and you pay for kelim as well. It's not a bar. On the other hand, the second part of the Brisa, which says, well, if you smash into the stone, you pay even for damages of kelim. That sounds like the stone is like a shor. That's a kasha on Shmuel, who says anything lying in the street is like a bar. So within the same Brisa, we're sort of stuck. Oh, so now according to you, tikshilach gufa. No, forget about Rav and Shmuel. How do you learn the Brisa? Reisha pater v'seifa chayev. First we say, an item sitting in the street is not liable for kelim because it's a bar. And then we say it is. Elo Rav mataris l'tamei, u'Shmuel mataris l'tamei. So we're compelled to sort of, reinterpret the Brisa, and we can do so, both according to Rav or according to Shmuel. Rav mataris l'tamei. Rav will interpret the Brisa according to his opinion. When do we say that something in the street, an obstacle, is considered like a bar? When he made it hefker. Hefker is a bar. But if it still is, chayav, we treat it like a shor, like his property, causing damage, and chayav, he pays for anything, even for damages occurring to kelim. And therefore the Brisa continues. Here's an example. A person smashes into my stone, which I still own, it's considered my shor, so I pay even for damage of kelim. Perfect. On the other hand, Shmuel can learn the Brisa his way. Now that you've established that all these things in the street, even if he still owns them, they're considered a bar, and a bar is pater on kelim. But the Rabbi Yehuda, the machayev on this kelim the bar, but we know there's a shita Rabbi Yehuda who says that the owner of a bar is liable for damages even occurring to kelim that fall into his bar. So that's a new shita. So according to that shita, we continue with the next part of the brayso. Therefore, its leiches damaged on an evan in the street is fully chayav. Okay, so bottom line is, we have a story of an accident in the street involving a pedestrian colliding with a puddle and shards of a container which had smashed on the street. So according to Rav, if we're speaking that he still owns the puddle and the shards, it's treated like a share, in which case you pay for any sort of damages, even on the kalim of the pedestrian. Whereas according to Shmuel, we treat it like a bar v'lo shar v'lo adam chamar v'lo kalim. Amar v'lazer lo shanu. Let's go back to this last case here. So a person collided with this evan, he broke his sloiches. The baal of the evan has to pay. Amar v'lazer lo shanu ela shenitkal be'evan. That's only because he collided with this stone. V'nishav be'evan. And he collided with it and he banged into it, meaning the pedestrian bumped into it, and his kli, his sleiches, crashed onto the evan as well. So it all happened directly from the evan. So the baal of the evan has to pay. Aval niskal b'karka v'nishav be'evan pata. But let's say he's walking along and he happened to trip on the sidewalk right near that stone, and he smashed his sleiches into the evan. So really, the evan is only partially responsible. The sidewalk is also responsible. The sidewalk is exempt because it belongs to nobody. So in this case, the owner of the evan does not have to pay at all, despite the fact that the owner of the tzleiches has no recourse, has nowhere to collect anything. Kiman delik Rab Nosson. Oh, so apparently this shita is not going like Rab Nosson, who holds that when there is sort of a joint, there are two parties that are jointly responsible, and I can't collect from one, I can go now and collect everything from the other one. Right? So that's what Rab Nosson holds. So here we say that even though I can't really collect from the sidewalk, I still cannot collect from the owner of the evan, because the evan says, look, what do you want from me? You tripped on the sidewalk. So even though you have no recourse, you have no right to collect from me. Ikadam is another version of this halach. Don't think that the only time there is payout is if he actually crashed and smashed into the evan. But if you would slip on the floor and happen to crash into that stone, in this case you would say the stone owner is exempt. Don't think so. No, that's incorrect. Even in the case where he tripped on the sidewalk, and as a result he smashed his container into the evan, chayav, the owner of the evan, has to pay. Why? What do you mean? Why do I have to pay? The answer is Kaman Rab Nosson, going like Rab Nosson Shita, which is a novel Shita, that ultimately, since the stone did contribute, did take part in the equation, so since you have no recourse, you have no way to collect from the sidewalk, you have a full right to collect from the stone owner to compensate you for your damages. Okay, so in summary, we had a shaila regarding Ovid Inish Dinah L'Nafshei. A person is under attack, a person wants to retrieve his belongings, protect his property. Can he do so? Can he take matters into his own hands? So if there's immediate impending damage and loss, of course he can do so. Otherwise, we have machlekes whether or not he can do so, or he has to go to the bezdin. We had a story about a fellow carrying a cot in the street, and it broke apart. We have a puddle, we have pieces of glass or pottery, and somebody comes along and is hurt. So the baal of the cod of the container is chayav. The machlekes Rav and Shmuel as to what formula to apply to the situation. Is it a situation of a shor hamazik, which is chayav even on kalim, or is it a bar hamazik, which follows the bar guidelines, shor v'lo adam chavar v'lo kalim? And we have the two versions in Rabbi Lezer, whether we apply Rav Nosson's formula to this situation or not. We'll continue as Hashem tomorrow. All the best to you, and Hatzlacha Rabbah.